Hi class, welcome back. Today I want to go over your preliminary bibliography assignment. So in the module number 2, I'm here at the bottom and I'm going to click on preliminary bibliography. We're going to look at it from a student view. All right, so I thought we were going to look at it from a student view. Every time I think technology is my friend, it fails me. There it is. Okay, so for this assignment, you are to do a few things. And so we're going to double check your work today to see if you have successfully accomplished those tasks. So if you would, wherever it is that you have your preliminary bibliography stored, whether it's on a Google Doc or if it's on a Word doc or just some other place, maybe even on the assignment, but just some place where you have your entry stored, you want to double check those entries as we go through the process of looking at the information here in the instructions. All right. So the first things first, you want to make sure that you have 10 sources and you want to make sure that you have all of the information needed from the Collin College Library database. And you have to have that hyperlink or that permalink connecting it to the Collin College database. Right. The next level of instruction says, don't worry about hanging indentions with bibliography. Sometimes you'll see them where the first line of it is a standard length, and then the second line under it is indented one tab space. That's pretty standard for bibliographies or works cited pages. For this assignment, you don't need to do that. We're sharing it in Canvas, which is going to separate each entry, so there's no need for the extra step to demonstrate that the entries are separated. That's what that hanging indention is for. The next thing you want to make sure that you do, you want to be sure to cite and edit your sources to receive credit. So the editing part's important. So we're going to look at those details today. Keep in mind it's a technical assignment, so careful attention to detail is required. All right, so let's start with first things first. The first thing you want to do, this is under the minimum requirements section, is to alphabetize your sources. So if you would double check your sources really quickly to see if you have alphabetized them. All right, and that's going to be starting with the letter A for the first word um, in your entry, or the letter that's closest to A. That should be your first source. And then all the way down to the letter that's closest to Z. That should be your last source. All right. And you're looking at the very first word of each entry, and you're looking at the first letter of the first word. Now, keep in mind the first word of your entry may be the author's last name. For some of us, we may not have the author's last name. Instead, the title of the text may be the very first thing that you see in the entry. It doesn't matter. Even still, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to the first word and first letter. All right, so double check to make sure everything's alphabetized. Unfortunately, if you forget to alphabetize everything, you just put your entries in, you will get all of your entries wrong. All right, and you won't get any credit for any of them. So this is a big deal. The next thing you want to do is capitalize, italicize, and punctuate according to the MLA guidelines. Um, the next step says review the information from the source, citation, format, and sample page. All of that information is here. So there's no need to really go all the way back to that page unless you like the way that that page communicates the information with the different colors. Keep in mind you want to double check each entry before submitting this assignment because no partial credit is given for incorrect entries. All right. So let's get started with the review of your sources. All right. First of all, the first thing you want to do is you want to pay attention to the author's last name. The author's last name is going to be the first part of the entry. It should be last name first and first name second. If you have a second author, then that author's name should be first name first and last name second. So it's just traditional um, format. All right. After the author's names, you want to have a period there. Basically, it's saying that the first part of this entry is its own sentence, and it's a sentence that represents the author's names. All right. Um, for this, you want to also double check for capitalization. Generally, students tend to uh, leave information in all caps, in other words, all capital letters. Uh, if the information from whatever citing format or citing feature that you use, if it translates it and it gives you the entry and all of the letters are capitalized, sometimes students will leave those letters as all caps. That is not what you should do here. You need to make those letters uppercase and lowercase. The same is true for the second part of your entry, which is going to be the title. The title has two things it needs to adhere to. Number one, it needs to have quotation marks around the title. And then secondly, it should not be in all caps. It should be again in upper and lowercase letters. And it should follow the guidelines for titles. So for titles, each word is going to be uppercase and lowercase. Um, the only exception to that is for three things. Number one, articles A, N, and D. Those should be lowercase in the title. Next, prepositions. So prepositions like in, on, of, at, those words, and then also and then also conjunctions. And these are going to be coordinated conjunctions. So for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. So those words should also be lowercase in titles. Other than that, um, for the most part, the words are upper and lowercase. All right. Also, at the end of that title, you want to make sure, kind of right before the end of it, that you have a period inside of the quotation mark. This indicates that the title is basically at the end of its own sentence. All right. So the next thing that we're going to pay attention to is this section, which is the journal publication. So if you look up here in the sample, you'll see that the journal is italicized. The journal is italicized again because it is a long work. So um, the article is a short work, so it has quotation marks around it. The journal is a long work, so it's italicized. You want to make sure that that this is done. Sometimes whenever you again use a cite feature, sometimes the italics does not translate, so you want to make sure it's there. After the journal, you should have a comma, and you should then see the volume, the issue number, the date, and the page numbers. And then at the end of that sequence, there'll be a period because essentially you're at the end of the sentence uh, regarding the journal and information about the journal. Usually, the volume, issue number, and date, those things usually translate just fine using a cite feature. But one thing you want to pay attention to is going to be the page numbers. Sometimes the page numbers don't translate whenever you are doing, when you're using a cite feature. Instead, you may get something that says in page, all capitals, capital N, capital P, capital A, capital G. If you get MPAG, you want to go back into the actual source, look at the actual document, and you want to give the range of pages. So if the document's 11 pages, you want to do 1 through 11. If the document has page numbers on it, but the page numbers didn't translate using the cite feature, you want to put those page numbers there, right? And at the end of that process, you should have a period, okay? So we just covered essentially the first part of this entry. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to look for capitalization errors. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to look for the italics. Um, and I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to look for the page numbers. And then I'll start up again with the next part of the entry. Okay. So write yourself a note if you noticed any of the things that we just covered that you need to address. All right. The next thing we're going to look at is going to be the database. EBSCO, Host, or Gale, or JSTOR, whatever database you use, it should be italicized. And that, again, it's because it hosts or it holds several journals, and therefore it is a long work. That's why it's italicized. Afterwards, there should be a comma, and then you should have your permalink, which is the hyperlink that links back to the Collin College database, right? So this is very important. The key things that should be there is going to be library.collin.edu, and the rest of the information will follow suit. So just paying attention to this one thing will let you know if you have a permalink or if you still have the regular hyperlink. All right. So you want to make sure that you have that detail. All of this is one sentence essentially, which is the database and then the address for the database. And so it ends with a period. After you add the database and after you have the hyperlink, the next thing you're going to look for is going to be the access date. So double check to make sure that you have an access date. The easiest way to arrive at this access date is to copy and paste the sample and then just change the date to today's date or whatever date it was that you accessed the source. And that's it. So you want to make sure that you, for your 10 entries, then copy and paste those 10 entries into the exam. So notice I clicked the blue button at the bottom. Mine said resume quiz, and that's because I started this quiz as a student in the course, and so it gave me the option to resume the quiz. For you, it may be the first time that you're doing it, so it may say take quiz. It may also give you an opportunity to take the quiz again. So whatever that blue button tells you is where you are in this process. Now, in terms of the assignment itself, question number one is going to be where you put your topic. Don't forget that topic should be communicated as a phrase, not as a sentence. Don't forget it should also have the keywords that connects to your actual topic, and you should have advocating words. Okay, words that advocate for your cause, words that tell your audience exactly what you want them to do or what you want to see changed or improved. All right, and here's our sample. So when I'm grading, I'm going to be looking to see, did you communicate this information in a phrase? Do I know exactly what your project is about? And are you telling me what you want to see transformed or improved? Okay. And so it's graded accordingly. If you miss any of these things, then you won't receive the full point. You'll only receive half of a point. Question two is going to be where you put your first entry. So again, these entries are alphabetized. So the entry that is the closest to the letter A or letter A for the first word, first letter, is what's going to go here. And then you'll put the second one, the third one, the fourth one, the fifth one, and so on, all the way until you get to the 10th entry, which will be for question 11. I would love for them to allow me to update this to have this as entry 10 as opposed to question 11. But here for the last couple of years or few years, I've been unsuccessful with updating the format of this. It sticks with the idea of a question. So you're going to have to know that this question really is asking you to put your entries in. So that's pretty much it in terms of the assignment. After you're done, then you will click this button at the bottom that says submit quiz. And once you submit the quiz, then it'll tell you if you have any unanswered questions. But you'll click OK, and then that will be the end of that. All right. Are there any questions at all about anything that I covered in terms of the preliminary bibliography assignment? Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for coming, and good luck on your quiz.